So last week we started this subject of the as Rav Chaim Shmulevitz calls it, the klal and the prat, right? So understanding, I guess, the power of the klal is really where he's focusing on, and we sort of saw the negative side of it last week, meaning that it's easy to get pulled into the a negative gezerah that's on the klal. So that's Rav Chaim Shmulevitz uses a few different examples to sort of show that, to develop that idea that the shevet Leivy, B'nai Leivy were only counted separately, completely separately, and that's because after the Chet Meraglim, there was a gezerah on B'nai Yisrael from anyone who was between the ages of 20 and 60. That's what the Psukim say, and so meaning that those who were counted. So they were counted completely separately, and the Torah goes out of its way to emphasize that idea that they were counted separately, to show that that was HaKadosh Baruch Hu's intent, was that they not be part of the klal in this example, so that they don't, they're not the same fate as the other shvatim. The other examples that he brings, though, is, we always sort of wonder, why is it that for Pesach, the whole Pesach story, why do we say that the Bechorei Yisrael had to not leave their house like the Bechorei Mitzrayim? Because once the Malach HaMaves or the Sar HaMashchis, the destroyer, is out, then we can sort of get pulled in. Even tzaddikim can get pulled in along with the Rashaim. So that's another example of how of how we can be pulled into the gzera of the klal, and because we were saved from that by Hashem, that's what made brought kedusha to the Bechorei Yisrael, even to today, where we still have to do a Pidyon Haben. And the third example he brings is that Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a lot of different ideas that are brought from Meforshim as to what exactly was the hate that Moshe did that made him not be able to go into Eretz Yisrael. But there's a chazal that says that he was part of that same gezerah by the Meraglim, even though it's not that he was above the age of 60. It wasn't that, but it says Ha'ish by that, and the Ish that we're talking about is Moshe. So he was brought into that gezerah as well. And then there's simply an idea that the Kadosh Baruch Hu has a plan for the world. And then each one of us as individuals, we have, Kadosh Baruch Hu sort of orchestrates, based on the decisions we make, the choices that we make, how that sort of works itself out so that we become, or we remain, part of that plan. And that's sort of what in the way that Rav Chaim Shmulevitz is understanding this, that's how Moshe ends up, sort of falling into the trap or falling into the gzera is it could have been by several different ways of having some form of a hate, whichever one it was pulls them into the trap of that gezerah. So those are the examples that he gave of how one can be negatively affected by the klal. But really, what I want to focus on now is the positive aspects of it, which is really powerful. So here he starts by saying, "Kmo kein matzinu litzad hatov." So too, the power of the klal for tov. So Isa be'ezor kodesh. So that he brings the Zohar, says, "V'yizkor Elokim es Noach, Reb Elazar Amar Tochazi Shad Dina Sharia Ba'alma Lo Liboy Inish Dedidchar Shmela Aliyah V'chulei." So there's this Maimer Chazal that says that the time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is donning, is judging the world, you don't need a person to sort of intercede. So what does that mean? How do we know this? Minolan me shumanit, shunamit. Sorry. So let me just back up for a moment. This is the story of the Shunamit, is this story by Elisha. There's a couple of stories right in a row where Elisha has these sort of, creates these miraculous events that sort of, either the first episode was the woman who she's a widow. Her husband was a navi, and they are extremely destitute, right? And this is the story of Elisha and I believe the flasks of oil. But then right after that is the story of the Shunamite, and this is a wealthy couple that that Elisha would visit. He would travel Eretz Yisrael, and he would and when he would travel up into their town, the Shunamite, this woman, would say to her husband, let's invite him over, let him stay with us while he's in town and teaching Torah or whatever whatever he's doing. And then they set up a bedroom for him so that anytime he's around, he would be able to just stay there. And he offers, he says, what can I do? They're a well-off family or well-off couple. They didn't have children. But that's sort of the backstory here, and so Elisha says to her, "What can I do for you?" In gratitude for hosting him. So it says that day, Chazal said, Yom Tov de Rosh Hashanah Habe. That day that Elisha offers us, this is Rosh Hashanah. And Hakadosh Baruch Hu is judging the world. Ukedein Amarla Elisha, and this is where Elisha says to her, "Hayesh ledaver lecha el hamelech, ledaver lecha el hamelech." I'll bring good word for you to the king. What do you want me to do? And so so Chazal darshan this. What does it mean? Ledaber lecha el hamelech da kuchabrichu. That was Elisha was saying that I will intercede on your behalf to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So what does she? How does she respond? Vatomer b'soch ami ani anochi yosheves. Within my, amongst my nation, I will sit. So what does that mean? Lo beina deidcharon bi vashkichun bi ela b'soch ami v'gomer ad kan. She retorts, so she says, "No, I don't want you to intercede for me. I will simply sit and daven and be with the rest of Am Yisrael, and that's it." V'hainu shekol zman shehi besoch ami nidunis hi yachad im kulam. As long as she is besoch ami, she is going to be judged with the rest of Klal Yisrael. V'zoche hi yachad im kol tzibor. So she is zocha to whatever the tzibor is zocha to. Limar shehi atzma ina ru'iyah lekach. Even if she were not herself roi to whatever the tzibor was going to be zocha to. But if she were going to be judged by herself alone, she could be in great danger. Even if she has Elisha himself being this, interceding on her behalf and davening for her, she could still be in great danger. And therefore, that's why she concedes and she says, "No, I don't want that. I just want to be with the tzibor." She simply wants to remain with the tzibor. And the Gemara in Brachos says something very similar, that you should always be mishantif. You also always should join in with the tzibor. Uperish Rashi, al yispalo tefillah k'tzara b'lashon yachid ela b'lashon rabim. Every time we daven b'lashon rabim, right? We always say, it's interesting when we think about the Shemona Esrei. There's so many things that, a lot of the brachos and Shemona Esrei are based on psukim in Tanakh, where we say that, we say rifa'ini in Tanakh, right? It says, heal me, but when we daven it in Shemona Esrei, it's rifa'inu. We always make it into the plural. We're always joining in with the tzibor. And it seems like that's what Rashi is sort of hinting at here, is that we always daven b'lashon rabim shemitoch kach tefillah nishmas, because through doing that, our tefillah will be heard. So v'yesh lahavi, and he asks, Rav Chaim asks, she'amnam tefilaso al hatzibor nishmas yoser. It's one thing to say that the tefillah of the tzibor should be heard more. You have a whole congregation of people davening. But but how does it quantitatively get better? In other words, how is it that that if I'm not zocha to something, but if I daven with the tzibur, I could still get it, even though I myself, as an individual, should not have been zocha to that, which seems to be what the Chazal, the Zohar was talking about with the Shunamit, is that one could be zocha to something that by latching onto the tzibur that you wouldn't be able to be zocha to on your own. So he answers the question. He says, "Ela shehein hein hadvarim." This is the idea. Shebetoch klal hatzibur zocha yachid afa pisha enu roi im ach lo gvedo chatav. No, he sort of does, parenthetically say, yes, you can be zocha to something you ordinarily wouldn't be. That's assuming that you're not a complete rasha, that you're not weighed down by a lot of chataim, right? That what we're talking about. The general rule, most of us, we're not talking about the people who are truly, might be chas v'sholom, might be completely laden down by chatoim. The hanhaga of Hashem is with Am Yisrael as a klal, ben l'tov, ben l'mutov, whether for the good, whether for the better, right? And therefore, we daven about the klal, we daven with the klal. And because of that, or through that, our prayers can be heard for what it is that we need as well. And again, even if we wouldn't necessarily be zocha to that on our own. And he says, "Ve'ikar inyan zehu lefi shat sibur ino rak siruf shoyechidim." He says we have to really understand why this is. Why it is what it is. That he says that the tzibur is not simply a collection of individuals. So the tzibur who mitzios acheres legamrei. The tzibur is a completely different entity entirely. And therefore, the tzibur can be zocha to something that when you put all the individuals together, they wouldn't be zocha to on their own. I guess the idea is what do we say? The klal is greater than the sum of its parts. It's that sort of an idea, right? Okay, sorry, I just read that. The Ran says this as well in his Roshos. So, Ad shemetzinu shenenesh adon hanavim b'zeh ba'amru shimuna hamorim. So both the shvach, the for the praise and also for the fear or the awesomeness of the tzibur, we have to understand that there is a tremendous amount of power that we have to take into account. As it says, when Moshe Rabbeinu says shimuna hamorim, right, this is by Mei Meriva. Right, he gets a little bit upset, right? And he's talking to Bnei Yisrael, and he's saying, and this seems to be, at least according to some Meforshim, this was the chait, that he refers to them as rebels. Even though each as an individual could have been roy, that might have been an appropriate thing to say to them, that they were rebels. Right, Rachman Lazan call Echem Yisrael Hayaroi Az Lator Hazeh Ach Nenash Arshchina Kach Es Kol Hatzibor. But this is not something that the Shechina is going to punish the Tzibor for. The Ayin Shem Shekasav Sheklal Yikne Shavach Umala Yosef Mamasha Roy Mitzat Pratav. And the Ran says, sort of his summary is that the klal is able to, acquire for itself a level of praise and elevation much more so than what would be for all of its individuals. And that was the problem that I guess again within this mahalach, that would be the problem of what Moshe Rabbeinu said, was that he's not taking into the account the power of the tzibur. V'zehabir b'divrei Chazal, Amar of Tanuchum b'Rav Chaniloi b'noeg shebaolam masa shekosha le'echad noach l'shnayim. So the Medrash says something very interesting. The Medrash says that in the world, in the physical world, something that's too heavy, for one, two people can pick it up, right? Kasha l'shnayim, noach le'arba. If it's something that's too heavy for two, get another two people. 4 people can carry it. Ve'ilu kabbalah satorah maaseh shekasha v'samach riboy noach le'echad. And then the Medrash is sort of the Medrash is sort of touting Moshe Rabbeinu's just his stature, who he was. But it says, but by Kabbalah Satorah, something that was too heavy for the 600,000 was easy. Noach le'echad for Moshe Rabbeinu. So l'chora yipaleh, but Rav Chaim asks a question on this. Wait a second. He says, "Amasa Noach yoser l'shnayim me'ashel echad mishum sha'kovid mischalek ben shneim." The first part of the Chazal of the Medrash makes sense because we're talking about the physical world, right? You take a physical object and you divide its weight in half, and it becomes easier to lift up, or divide it by a quarter, and it becomes easier to lift. We all understand that part of the metaphor. Well, wait a second. Right? You're only carrying a half of it. But how is this? How is the other side of this analogy working out? It doesn't matter that you have 600,000 that would lift it up. Each person has to be makabel the Torah ourselves. It's not like the 3 of us can split up the 613 mitzvahs, right? We all only have 200 and change. It doesn't work that way. We all have to accept the entire Torah upon ourselves. So what does this mean? So he says, "V'hein hein dvareinu." He says, "No, this is what the Medrash is trying to teach us. Atzibur hu metzius acheres legamrei. Atzibur is a completely different animal. V'kocho gadol harbe yoser mekoach hayechidim shemehem murkav atzibur, and the power of it is much greater than the power of just the individuals that make up the tzibur. V'ein kan samach ribo yechidim. We don't have 600,000 individuals." Ala klal shel samach riboy. We have a klal that's made up of 600,000, but the klal is a thing. And therefore, when we think about the yoke, the weight of receiving the Torah, it's not something that each one of us has to lift up individually. But the klal itself is what brings the Torah. And he says, in this earlier mimer, he goes into this with a little bit more depth, and he talks about the idea that the Torah would have never been given to individuals, to groups of individuals. The Torah could only be given to a klal. And that's really, I think, what he's driving at here, is that you have to have a klal of 600,000 that can lift up and receive the Torah, because an individual, even Moshe Rabbeinu, would not have received the Torah on his own. And so now the analogy makes more sense when, again, the idea of it is to say that Moshe Rabbeinu had incredible stature, that he was able to say, that he was able to keep hearing all of Torah from Hashem, whereas we could only hear the first 2, right? But the idea that why couldn't 600,000 lift it up? Meaning 600,000 is what accepted the Torah in the first place, as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu, who's able to stand on his own and listen and talk, mouth, P to P, as a person speaks to a friend to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So again, the power of the klal here is that it's only the klal that can receive the Torah. Okay, we're getting close to the end now. So I'll go to koach hatzibur. There's more ideas here of this idea of the strength of the tzibur. Ksiv v'haya lecha Hashem le'or olam. The pasuk says, and Hashem is the light of the world. When is that? So the Chazal say that's when we are all united together. We understand that, again, in the physical world, the analogy is that that if I take an entire bundle of straw, then you can't break it. It's like it's too big, it's too heavy. There's no way you can do anything with it. But if you just take one of those stalks of straw from it, even a child can break it in half, right? Can snap it. And so too, that Yisrael could not be redeemed until we were one aguda. We were all one, unit together. Because when we were all together, that's when we could be makabel the pnei shechina. Klomar, after kol echad be'echad Yisrael b'fnei atzmo eino roy legula lekabalas pnei shechina ach kulam agudim yachad gulam ma'alas haguda v'kocha ad shezochim higoel lekabel pnei hashchina. And just to continue this idea, v'chein metzina b'matan Torah dichsev. So what does this mean? This aguda, that's what we saw by Matan Torah. It says vayichan sham Yisrael neged ahor, and we camped right at the base of the mountain. And Rashi says Isha Chad, right? It doesn't say vayachanu. This is vayichan, right? That's a famous word for Rashi that we are there. Ish echad belev echad. V'ayin sham the orachayim shapira shazu hayza hachana lekabbalas Torah. This was the hachana for kabbalas Torah. Shenasu kulam ki'ish echad v'ayidei zeh hayu ru'uim lekabbalas haTorah. V'chein amru Chazal, the Sanu Yisrael as hamachlokas. As a shalom and achas, right? The fact that we hated machlokas in that moment, we all wanted to be united together. That was the power of being able to receive the Torah. All right, lahem Torah si. That's the time when I will give my Torah. Yunsham. That's the Orchaim. Who mashma arnu masa shamatan Torah kashahu meod. The masa, the receiving the Torah is an extremely difficult thing. The raka klal mesugol so. Vayidei kach shenasu kulam ki'ish echad belev echad notzer kan klal. That's how we created a klal, is by being one person with one heart. Shebekocho lekabel Torah ayidei Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, we just have a few minutes left. So I'm going to just hit on the last couple of ideas that he brings in. Let's look at this one. This is a beautiful idea. Shelo rak shegodo kochem shel klal Yisrael v'tzibur kulo ela gam yechidim. Kol kama shemizadim yachad godo kochem. He says that it's not only about the klal and the tzibur, but even when you have individuals that come together, you just have more, like their strength increases, even when you have a small group coming together. Ksiv. V'radfu mikem chamisha mea u'mea mikem revava yirdufu. So this is in Bechukosai when we're almost at the Tokacha, but we're talking about we're still in the brachos part of it, and the pasuk says that 5 of you will chase 100 of them, and 100 of you will chase 10,000. So the math is a little bit off. So, B'Toras Kohanim, the Medrash in Toras Kohanim says, this makes any sense. In other words, if we're saying 5 to 100, that's a 20-fold. But if we're talking about 100 to 10,000, now that's 100-fold. So why are we jumping from a 20-fold to 100-fold? What it should have said is, Ela mea mikem shnei alafim yirdufu, right? It should have been 100 to 2,000, then it would have been the same, right? The same fraction or the same multiple. Ella eno dome mu'atim ha'osim esator lemerubim ha'osim esator. But he says no. This is the vort. The vort is that you can't compare 5 to 100. Hari lenu hefresh gado ben kochem shel chamisha lekochem shel mea. The strength is just goes up, geometrically. He called. Kamasha aguda gedola yoser godo kocha pi kama bechama. Right? It's a beautiful idea that the power of the tzibur, grows with the numbers. Okay. Let's take a look at this. These are the last couple of paragraphs, but here's another powerful idea. So Amru Chazal gedola legima she mirchakas es hakrovim me'amun u'moav. So Chazal say that the power of food is that it distances those who are close to us. We learned that from Ammon and Moab. Umikareves es harechokim, and it also brings closer those who are far apart from us. Miyisro, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, B'schar koren lo v'yochal lechem. So starting with Yisro, when Sipporah and her sisters come back, and after Moshe had helped them to give water to their flock, and then Yisro says, "Call him in and let's feed him. Let's give him what to eat." So from that, Zachu b'nei bana v'yeshu b'lishchas agazis. From that act, Yisro was zocha to that his descendants would be members of the Sanhedrin, of the Lishkas Agazis. Ma'amas ayin min reshoim memicha. And it also protects you from evil. How do we know that? Memicha, from Pesel Micha, right? Micha puts up a big Pesel, a big Avodah Zarah. She'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'malachei hashoris hanichu lo. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the Malachim, leave him alone. Don't touch Micha. Why? Shepito mitzuya le'ovrei derachim, because he used to feed those who were coming through and needed snack or food on the way up for their travels. Mamasher shchina al ovrei habal, and then not only that, it's also the ovrei habal were zocha to nevuah. How do we know this? Mechavero shel Ido Hanavi. There's a famous story of Ido Hanavi. Kadosh Baruch Hu told him, "Don't eat anywhere except where I tell you to eat." And then Navi Sheker, who was a Ovdei Baal, comes to him and says, "No, Kadosh Baruch Hu said you can eat with me. I'm also a Navi." He eats with him. This Navi then says, "You're going to die because you went against Hashem." How did he know that? Because he was Mashur Shchina, because he fed him. Ido does die, etc. But we see that even a false prophet, an Ovdei Chavim, is zocha to this type of Ruach HaKodesh because he fed Ido. Okay. B'ayin sham berashi shapirish legima achila shemachil orchim. This is food that you're providing to those who are coming into your house. V'nira malashon gemara she'ena mala mifnei mitzvahs hachnasas orchim. But we're not talking about hachnasas orchim. We see that clearly. There's no mention of hachnasas orchim. That's not the mitzvah we're talking about here. That's so powerful. He says that this is the same vort. We'll finish up here, but that's the same vort, that when you're feeding people and you're bringing people together, that is an incredible power. And that's the incredible power, that there's all these different Maimer Chazal all saying basically the same thing, that even if we're not talking about the entirety of the Tzibor and the entirety of the klal, even bringing a group of people together and being like-minded or working on something together, bringing them in, feeding them, giving them an Isauda, that has an incredible amount of power and Kedusha to it. So with this, we'll stop, but we're seeing a lot of different examples of how the idea of coming together, even in a small group, like the 5 against 100 in the Pasuk, still has incredible power.